Assalamu alaikum dear students, and welcome to the 41st session of the KIPS Distance Learning Program Current Affairs News Over Roundup session. I am your host Shahrukh Haider, and the topic for today is going to be what is the friction that we've been seeing between Pakistan and Saudi relations in recent time. So as you all know, perhaps if you've read the news or listened to the television, that in recent times Pakistan has basically signaled some kind of frustration with its relation with Saudi Arabia, and the foreign minister's comments in a recent interview to a TV channel were also of a similar nature. So what has happened? Well, basically in a TV interview, the scandal or the difference in bilateral relations began when the foreign minister Qureshi, during an interview to an private news channel, said that Pakistan was frustrated with Saudi Arabia's reluctance and the OIC reluctance to hold a session, a committee on Kashmir, basically a Kashmir Summit. And that reluctance stems from a number of reasons, but before we can look into that, let's see what events followed that declaration by the foreign minister. The foreign minister was visibly perturbed in that interview, and he showed a considerable amount of frustration in his approach towards the Saudi question. Now, he also said that Pakistan, refrained from joining the Kuala Lumpur summit that was held in Malaysia in 2019 on the request of Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia thought that the emerging Muslim bloc was a challenge to its leadership in the Muslim world, and rightly so. Moreover, there is massive, change in Saudi, basically foreign policy towards the South Asian region as well. I believe that there are at least 4 reasons why basically Saudi Arabia's reluctance on Kashmir Summit is visible, and why the OIC, which is dominated by Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, obviously having 57 member Muslim states, has been unable to produce any kind of joint statement or summit or plan of action against Indian occupation, annexation and brutal regime in Indian occupied Kashmir. So the first reason is obviously the increasing Saudi-India strategic alignment, partnership in a broader US-led anti-China bloc. So in recent times, at least as long as 2008, India is being groomed by the United States of America as a counterweight to China. And to further bolster American efforts to contain the emerging economic, political and military power of China, America is seeking even more allies. One of those is Saudi Arabia. Now, in recent times, we have seen substantial increase in trade, bilateral relations and cordial relations between Saudi Arabia and India. That strategic alliance has created a sort of dependence of Saudi Arabia on India for its products, for its markets, where massive oil is being imported by India, which forms a massive part of the Saudi Arabia's GDP, which is why it is reluctant to do anything that might disturb that economic partnership. Thirdly, actually, the second reason is the massive oil exports from Saudi Arabia to India. The third reason is obviously generally the Gulf's increasing tilts towards India. In recent times, in 2019, the UAE also awarded the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi the highest civilian award of the UAE, which was a direct indication that the Gulf states sees India as an important partner in their economic relationship, in their strategic partnership, and going into the future. Which means that generally the mood in the Gulf region, which basically dominates the OIC and the foreign policy of Gulf and Saudi Arabia, is that they do not want to do anything that would basically harm their relationship with India, or in any way possible create any kind of rift between the Gulf states, including Saudi Arabia and India. And finally, I think this is a simple matter of economics over ideology. Gulf's relation and Saudi Arabia's relation with India is based purely on an economic angle, whereas the Saudi Arabia and Gulf and OIC support to Kashmir is based on an ideological position. Now, in a world where states behave almost solely for their economic and political interests rather than for any ideological or moral values, it is obvious that Saudi Arabia would behave in that manner and not provide any kind of diplomatic support or the kind of support and bolster that the Kashmir issue needs from Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states. So we need to see why, in recent times there's been some friction between Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. I believe there are a number of reasons for that. Well, first of all, we have seen an increasing convergence of Pakistan's foreign policy in the new Turkey-Malaysia-Iran Red Muslim bloc, which is a direct threat to the leadership role and the dominance of Saudi Arabia in the OIC and the greater Muslim world. The greater Muslim world has largely, credited Saudi Arabia as the leader of the Muslim world and has given it that platform and followed especially its religious dictates to the extent that Saudi Arabia has engulfed its tentacles all over the Muslim world. In recent times we have seen that in that interview that I was just talking about, the foreign minister also talked about Pakistan holding a summit on Kashmir outside the platform of OIC with Muslim countries that share Pakistan's views. Now that was a clear indication of the new emerging bloc that Pakistan is becoming aligned with, obviously to the irritation of Saudi Arabia, because it is a direct threat to the dominance of Saudi Arabia in Gulf and Muslim region. It naturally do not want that bloc to emerge as an important power center. Whereas Pakistan is viewing that bloc with a positive, approach, because it serves Pakistan's interest and strategic alignment in the longer run much better than Pakistan's strategic alignment with Saudi Arabia has, which has come with its own very important and potentially destabilizing consequences, such as the emergence and the explosion of extremist and fundamentalist and terrorist ideologies in Pakistan, which was largely fueled by Saudi Arabian propaganda machines and investment and huge madrasa network that they started and funded and initiated and supported in Pakistan during the 80s and 90s. That was a complete national security disaster for Pakistan, and we have had to face the brunt of it for the following 20 years. Ever since the global war on terror in 2001 until today, we have lost more than 80,000 people and $120 billion damage to our economy. Now, Saudi Arabia is complicit in all those crimes. Whereas when it comes to our relationship with Turkey, with Iran largely, and Malaysia, they haven't really done us any harm in any way. Our relationship with them have only been positive, trade, cordial, and everything. So that is one of the reasons why Pakistan's changing foreign policy in the Muslim world is becoming irritable to Saudi Arabia, which is why, considering its own interests vis-a-vis India and Pakistan's increasing tilt towards, let's call it anti-Saudi Arabia bloc, Saudi Arabia is reluctant to help Pakistan in this matter. Secondly, we have seen Pakistan's bilateral relationships with Iran substantially improving. Now that once again is an irritator in Pakistan-Saudi relationship, because Saudi Arabia and Iran are locked in a very tight Cold War in the region for the competition over the dominance and hegemony and influence over the entire Middle Eastern region. Now Iran to a large extent is alone in this fight, whereas Saudi Arabia is bolstered by 6-7 Gulf states, and especially the United States of America and Israel, who all want to see Iran basically toppled and its Islamic regime eradicated to bring a more pro-West and pro-Saudi Arabia compliant regime in Iran. And they have tried doing that a number of times in the past, albeit they have been frustrated. So Pakistan's increasing partnership with Iran and warming up is clearly seen in the recent, Iran-China strategic partnership valued at $400 billion. Now, the potential for increasing economic, political and social engagement between Pakistan and Iran has also substantially increased with this deal between Iran and India. And also, in recent times, Iranian foreign minister and their important state officials have clearly stated that Iran is increasingly interested in becoming a partner in CPEC. Now, that is once again a challenge to, Saudi Arabian interest and partnership in CPEC, which, by the way, if you remember, in 2018, Prince, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, came to Pakistan and announced a $10 billion investment in a Gwadar oil refinery. Our relationship to Iran could cost us that Saudi Arabian investment. However, in the long term, I believe that it is more beneficial for Pakistan to make a more conducive and a friendly neighborhood than to avert all our attentions and be dominated by an extra regional power such as Saudi Arabia. So I think this is a realization that largely Pakistani establishment and Pakistani foreign policy, power structure has also realized, and this is the direction that they're moving towards. Now, naturally, in this direction, our relationship with Saudi Arabia is going to be a victim. There is no question about it. But on a balance of probability, I think it's a good alternative for us to look towards our neighborhood rather than over the seas and into territories which really don't have anything to do with us. And finally, there is an emerging anti-Iran alliance in the Middle East, as I've already told you, which was quite clear in the UAE-Israel peace deal, which was not really a peace deal, it was basically an anti-Iran deal, and also a deal to give legitimacy to Israeli occupation and annexation of Palestinian land, which amount to crimes against humanity and genocidal intent. And more states are also expected to join UAE in normalizing relations with Israel. Now that will naturally have an impact on Pakistan's relationship with the Gulf region as well, because Pakistan will not recognize Israel, largely because of public sentiment in Pakistan rather than any foreign policy rationalization. And secondly, an anti-Iran bloc is also against Pakistani interest, because an anti-Iran bloc could prove to be fatal in the case of starting a war with Iran, which obviously by all means and simple logic states that is very bad for Pakistan generally, the region, which is why Pakistan would do everything in its power to reduce the tensions, to ensure that a war scenario never evolves. So the creation of an anti-Iran bloc in the Middle East is naturally against the national security interests of Pakistan, which is why once again Saudi Arabia, which is part of that anti-Iran bloc, is moving away from Pakistan, because Pakistan's stance on that bloc is negative and Pakistan would never support, and Pakistan would do everything in its power to prevent any kind of armed conflict in this region, because we have had already too many armed conflict, and we know now, hopefully, that conflicts are extremely bad. So with all that in mind, I think that there is a substantial change in the Muslim world coming, and you guys should keep your eyes open for what's happening in the Muslim world, coming developments, and especially all the relevant links that I've mentioned in the video description. Be sure to go and read them, make your notes, and then determine how you perceive this entire scenario. I have one question for you that might appear in the CSS 2021, which goes something like this: what is Pakistan's role in a changing Muslim world? Simple question.